What's up, Alexis here. In this video I will talk about Tappei Nagatsuki's book ReZero Starting Life in Another World's first volume. Nagatsuki is best known for making the history of ReZero outstanding among others because he has written about alternate universes or histories parting from his main history. And I know what you're thinking, what is guy is talking about? Well, we get to that later. The book was originally published in January of 2014 in Japan. It has 292 pages and it's white in the cover from both sides, and it has a illustration from one of the characters of the history. First of all, I must say that I decided to read this because I saw the anime adaptation that was in TV a couple years ago, well, in Japan. So I liked the history, and I heard that the book have more information or more detail about the history. So I decided to read it because I wanted to know all of that. With that morbid of knowing the truth, that's why I'm here. The history is told by a third-person narrator that begins describing in what world or mostly the situation that our protagonist is in. I must say in this point that this history is more dedicated to people who already have a prior knowledge in this kind of histories, since it makes a lot of references on other histories of that kind, of a guy that was transported in another world. But it does so through the protagonist that is probably, like most of the readers, and a casual otaku that is full of these histories. Our protagonist is an average person, a young man that is being transported into another world, one of fantasy and adventures, like many others of this genre. But he has an interesting personality, one that makes funny almost every moment he is in, and makes you in a certain way and understand why he's making the decisions he makes along the history. All of the other characters are mostly secondary because all the actions in this volume at least are centered in our protagonist and the decisions he made to pass through all his problems around the history. But it doesn't mean that the all other characters are plain or boring. Each one of them is described and introduced to you in a very detailed way, and you can imagine them by the way it describes it to you. And as you continue reading, you can know them more and more. So the history behind them is told in that way. The history takes mostly place in a city, a very crowded city, but it always ends in a deadly place where no one of you will want to be. If you don't understand what I said, always ends, you'll have to read the book to understand. But in all this path from the city to the deadly place, you will know a little bit more from this magical world, but it keeps hiding some information to you read the other volume. I found it easy to read. The narration is very understandable, so you can keep track of all what happens in the history, because oh man, it gets tricky. It has a balance in the dialogue and the narration. It almost feels like you are reading the thoughts of all the characters, but you really are only reading the thoughts of the protagonist, because it's mostly like the narrator is only narrating the point of view of him and not the other characters. So the characters are very interesting, especially the protagonist, who lightens the moments with their spontaneous commentary. This is a way to relax the reader where there haven't been so much action in the scenes, and it makes it very fun. But where are there more important moments, like an action or something that needs to be described, are few occasions when the protagonist make a commentary, but it doesn't seem a little bit off. It's more like something that even you as seeing what is happening will make probably. Well, in this video I was planning to explaining more about the history, because from here I don't talk about too much the what happens in the history, but the most that I can tell you without saying spoilers is that it gets you in a kind of loop where you are going to need to pay attention from details from your previous read, so you can understand better what's going on and what's going to happen next, because as you are thrown in the history like the protagonist with no information at all of what's happening, you are collecting information with the protagonist, what makes you understand even more the situation he is in. But well, I already talked about too much about the history. I think it's moment to continue reading the other volumes. I mean, you only have this little review of the first, but I will continue reading the rest of the history because I personally want to know more about what happened next. I did my best to not tell something that could spoil the history, but as I said at the beginning, it's kind of for most for people who is familiar with these kind of histories, but also you don't need really to know all of these histories about guys going into another world, a magical world, because because the history is more like telling itself in a different way. That's the reason I like it too much, because personally I like the histories of these guys that go into another world, and this is become one of my favorites because it was different to the others. I think it takes a more realistic way to think about this. It really makes you think what will happen if a real guy will when a real guy will be taken into another world and not having any idea what was happening. It also makes you think a lot about all those what ifs. You know what I mean? It's what would happen if he wouldn't die that time. Oh, that wasn't a spoiler, but it's because of that the history has so many alternative histories. So I would enjoy read all of them, but I can have that lazy feel of reading almost 30 of them that they are out now. Anyway, I highly recommend you this history. I think it's a very interesting way to see this type of histories. And if you already watched the anime, if I think it has, I personally think the anime had a very good adaptation from this volume, because this volume is like the first episodes, and you can tell that the book is being retated as it is in the anime, but the book makes you understand more the characters, makes you understand more the decisions the protagonist is making, because in the anime I think it kind of gets away from what he's doing, because you are not experiencing this lecture that the narrator does of his actions, so you understand it better in the book. That's what I liked it. Well, I'll see you guys next time.